Watch right now on the Front News Project. A powerful attack on Russian aviation, a harsh strike on Crimea, Russian helicopters are burning. Counteroffensive in SU 2026, Putin's army is trapped in a cauldron in southern Ukraine. And also a ring of nuclear states on Russia's border, the nightmare of Putin. Fiery, hot and blazing. Watch footage from the front lines right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. The Ukrainian armed forces are tearing the enemy apart on many fronts. The greatest successes are being observed in the south of the country. In addition, precise strikes on military targets behind enemy lines are creating major problems for the Russians with their weapons supplies. About the advance of Ukrainian defenders forward. More in the report.
The armed forces of Ukraine are disrupting the Russians' plans.
Site 400, Sling 30 to 0. Kutumi 4504, you have now replaced Siratit. You may open fire whenever you are ready. Proceed directly toward the island.
Ukrainian defenders delivered a powerful strike against Russian targets in temporarily occupied Crimea. 3 PANTSIRS-1 anti-aircraft missile and gun systems were targeted at once, and the occupiers' mobile fire group was completely neutralized. In the area of Novoozernoye, a high-speed BK-16 landing craft, which the enemy used for maneuvers and to strengthen coastal defenses, was put out of action. Additionally, the Kirovskaya airfield was struck. 4 control stations for Orion strike reconnaissance drones and their storage site were destroyed. And that's not all. The Middle Strike Unit, through special operations, eliminated targets with precise strikes. 4 enemy radar stations on the peninsula. The 5 N-84A Oborona 14 radar, the Nebo-U radar, and 2 stations in radomes in Yevpatoria. At the same time, an element of the enemy's command post was destroyed in the temporarily occupied Zakatovka in the Donetsk region. Important targets were also struck in the area of Donetsk airport. The infrastructure for preparing and launching strike drones came under the sights of Ukrainian defenders. Shahed. To accurately destroy these targets, the armed forces of Ukraine used ATACMS and Scalp missiles. As a result, warehouses and UAV preparation points were destroyed. A large-scale fire and secondary detonations were recorded.
They have started to economize. They are trying to save on means, on resources being allocated, on ammunition, and so on. And this is important. And this speaks to their current condition. This shows their capabilities at the present time.
In addition, UAV control points were hit in the Luhansk region, in Debrova, and in the Kharkiv region, in Kruglyakhovka. At the same time, enemy artillery positions in Tavelzhanka, Voskresenka, and Novopalovka were disabled. Strikes also targeted areas where the occupiers' manpower was concentrated. Novorihorivka and the railway station in Zaporizhzhia region, Turska in Donetsk region, and Sapich in Sumy region. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukrainian scouts stopped the enemy's advance. For 3 months in a row, special forces have been holding the defense and not allowing the occupiers to approach the regional center. During this time, fighters from the Timur special unit have eliminated more than 300 occupiers, and another 39 have been taken prisoner.
With precise strikes from drones and artillery, military intelligence operatives are systematically limiting the logistics capabilities of the Muscovites. Due to a lack of supplies, the occupiers are increasingly refusing to carry out assault operations in this direction. The actions of the special forces have made it possible to stabilize the defense along lines advantageous for Ukrainian defenders, and to secure Zaporizhzhia.
Alongside these strikes, the defense forces are reclaiming Ukrainian land. In the south of the country, up to 435 square kilometers of territory have already been retaken from the enemy and are under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine.
What have our armed forces accomplished? They are in the south of our country. Over the past month and a half, they have carried out a number of important defensive actions and in some areas offensive operations. All of these actions were aimed exclusively at thwarting the plans of the Russian Federation. We believe that we have quite successfully regained control over approximately 400 to 435 kilometers.
According to the head of state, Ukrainian defenders this winter held all key defensive lines but did not achieve significant results at the front. However, despite colossal losses both deep in the rear and on the front line, the Kremlin's plans remain unchanged. Moscow is not abandoning its ambitions and is still betting on a spring offensive. The main target of the occupiers is eastern Ukraine.
The main objectives are the east of our country, the capture of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Basically, their plans have not changed. The delay is happening because they are unable to achieve this with the means and forces they currently have, due to the actions of our armed forces. In addition, the southern direction was also considered. And
while in Moscow they are frantically drawing new lines of advance on their maps, the reality is different. Both at the front and in the rear, things look different. The Ukrainian army is not only disrupting the enemy's plans, but is also gradually seizing the initiative, destroying logistics, knocking out air defense systems, reclaiming territories, and holding key positions.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Pokrovsk direction of the front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. Since the beginning of the day on the Pokrovsk direction, the occupiers have tried 12 times to push our soldiers from their positions. This has occurred in the areas of the settlements of Nekonorivka, Rodinske, Menohrad, Pokrovsk, Kotlina, Udakne, Novonikolayevka, and towards Novolexandrivka. One attack is still ongoing. The so-called special military operation is clearly not going according to plan. Putin will end up with a ring of nuclear states around his borders. The fact is, Finland has announced its desire to acquire its own nuclear weapons, and it's not the first. Just recently, Poland also announced similar plans. It's practically a nightmare for Putin. Here are the details.
What was long considered taboo is now being openly discussed among European leaders. The war that the Kremlin supposedly started to strengthen its own security has turned out to be far more dangerous for Moscow than Putin anticipated. Something the Kremlin has feared for decades will now appear on Russia's borders. A whole ring of states ready to participate in the nuclear deterrence system.
Russia is a global bandit that creates nothing but threats and risks. In
Finland, a country with more than 1,300 kilometers of shared border with Russia, is preparing to take an unprecedented step and reconsider one of the key laws of its defense policy. In Helsinki, they are planning to lift the ban on the deployment of nuclear weapons that has been in effect since 1987. This decision is intended to allow the country to fully integrate into NATO's nuclear deterrence system in the event of war.
This amendment is necessary so that Finland can carry out military defense as part of the alliance, and fully take advantage of the benefits of NATO's deterrence and collective defense.
Similar discussions are becoming increasingly prominent in other European countries as well, especially in those places where the Russian threat is felt most acutely. In particular, Poland is speaking more and more often about the need for its own nuclear protection. According to Bloomberg, Warsaw is striving to acquire its own nuclear capability.
Poland takes nuclear security very seriously. As our autonomous capabilities grow, we will strive to prepare Poland for the most independent actions possible in this matter in the future.
The number of countries open to such dialogues is increasing. Previously, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway had expressed their readiness to discuss nuclear deterrence. These are states that, until recently, adhered to the most cautious defense policies.
Sweden is ready to participate in these important negotiations alongside others.
Against this backdrop, the role of France is also growing, as it is the only European Union country with its own nuclear arsenal. Paris is actively discussing with its European allies the possibility of strengthening the so-called nuclear umbrella over Europe in case the continent's security comes under direct threat.
My responsibility is to ensure that our deterrence continues to maintain its destructive power in a dangerous, changing, and unstable environment. That is why I have ordered an increase in the number of nuclear warheads in our arsenal. We will no longer disclose the numbers of our nuclear arsenal, unlike what may have been done in the past. To be free, one must command respect, and to command respect, one must be strong.
And although Washington assures that the United States is still ready to guarantee European security with its nuclear capabilities, in Europe the idea is increasingly voiced that relying on a single ally is no longer enough.
Russia does not have the capacity to sustain, to expand, or to participate in this race.
Nuclear weapons serve as a kind of guarantee that another country will not use not only nuclear weapons against that country, but also other types of weapons. This is the main message for Russia. And for those countries that might use nuclear weapons, to deter them from using it against Western countries. With
each passing day, it is becoming more and more obvious. A new nuclear arms race has begun in the world. A race in which security has become a strategic argument. And the old rules of deterrence no longer guarantee the same stability as before.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Konstantinovka front line. The enemy army's bloody rampage continues. And here, on the Konstantinovka front, the invaders carried out 10 offensive actions in the areas of the settlements of Konstantinovka, Ivanopolia, Ilyanovka, Rusinyar, and Sofievka. And here is another very telling story. General Tsalikov, Shoigu's deputy when he headed the Russian Ministry of Defense, is facing prison for corruption. But Tsalikov is just one link in a colossal chain of bribe takers and squanderers that has multiplied within the Russian military leadership. We will tell you about them, and it will be very interesting.
The calm in the Russian Ministry of Defense did not last long. The investigation has reached Shoigu's closest associate, Ruslan Tsalikov.
No one knows as much about the former minister and Putin's friend as he does. Tsalikov followed Kuzhugetovich around like a Decembrist's wife.
No one was closer to Sergei Shoigu. I even think his mistress is less close to him than Tsalikov because it's been more than 30 years. In every position, whether it was the governorship in the Moscow region or a post in the Ministry of Emergency Situations or the Ministry of Defense, everywhere he was his closest and first deputy. So this is a super trusted guy, a person who, of course, is not a military man, not an emergency services worker, not a politician, but he held these important positions, and everywhere he was one of Sergei Kuzhugetovich's main moneymen. And we see that now, when he has already been taken down, Shoigu is left without his closest associates at liberty.
The only difference is that, unlike John the Decembrist, Tsalikov never renounced his privileges, let alone his wealth. Of course, like any respectable Russian official with a mediocre salary, he registered everything in his children's names. And Ruslan Tsalikov has as many as 4 children. And according to investigators from Navalny's team, Dad managed to provide for all of them.
Through their company, Liza and Yulia Tsalikova bought a 264 square meter property in the Moscow business center Kroswell-Kamovniki for 132 million rubles, and several office spaces at 24 Pozledny Lane with a total value of 85 million rubles. Tsalikov's sons Daniel and Zaur were even luckier. They own real estate using the same scheme as their sisters. Through their company, Dominus said, the brothers bought 2 plots of land in the village of Krasnoye in Domodedovo. One of them, however, they have already managed to sell. Each plot is almost 1,000 sotkas and costs 260 million rubles apiece.
The Tsalikovs also registered 5 more properties to Dominus Zid at once. With a total area of over 1,000 square meters, a business center from sugar factory on Zemlya Noival, they are worth almost 400 million. They bought up real estate quite recently, right during the war. In total, we found that the children of the Deputy Minister of Defense own property worth 1,100 million rubles.
If we don't pay attention to our own children, then why did we, excuse my language, even have them?
At the Ministry of Defense, Tsalikov was in charge of propaganda. He oversaw the Unarmia Youth Army and the Park Patriot Project. In addition, he was responsible for Sergei Shoigu's personal PR and his finances. Tsalikov oversaw the Department of Financial Control, meaning he managed the ministry's enormous budget.
Ruslan Tsalikov is something like a Grand Vizier, steward, treasurer, and financial director all rolled into one. At the Ministry of Defense, this is the period we know especially well. He handled the most important assignments that came directly from Sergei Shoigu. If land needed to be distributed in some settlement to generals and deputy ministers, Ruslan Tsalikov was the one who handled it. If someone needed to go and negotiate sensitive issues, Ruslan Tsalikov was the one who did it. If it was necessary to divvy up, without exaggeration, a 1 trillion ruble budget allocated for construction for the Ministry of Defense, Ruslan Salikov was the one in charge. Only after him did Timur Lanov handle these matters, who, I remind you, is in prison and will apparently remain there for the rest of his days, because they won't let him go to the war.
It was Timur Ivanov who, after being put in pre-trial detention, informed on his boss Salikov. And as reported by the media, Salikov himself even came in for a face-to-face confrontation. According to VCHKO GPU, the general was supposed to be detained as early as last spring. But first, Shoigu's protection, and later the intervention of Marat Kambolov, vice president of the Kurchatov Institute Research Center, managed to stall the process. For this, Salikov paid $20 million. But his immunity didn't last long.
Several individuals involved in other corruption scandals gave testimony against Ruslan Salikov. All of them are pre-trial detainees, people who made deals with the investigation and received the right to have their cases considered under a special procedure in court. At the very least, all the defendants in Timur Ivanov's case regarding the purchase of ships circumventing sanctions and the embezzlement of funds from Intercommerce They testified that Salikov was behind everything. The charge of organizing a criminal community may indicate that law enforcement intends to combine the cases of Ruslan Salikov with the cases of two other former deputies of Shoigu, Pavel Popov and Timur Ivanov, as well as other high-ranking officials of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
Already now, Russia's main propagandists are reporting that Salikov could end up behind bars for 20 years. Moreover, all his property could be confiscated in favor of the state. Ruslan Salikov is the last of the 4 associates of Sergei Shoigu with whom he came to the Russian Ministry of Defense. And now, in the highest offices of Moscow, they are searching for an answer to the question, will Shoigu's closest ally betray him, and what will Putin decide? Will he really forget their fishing trips together and the pine nuts in the taiga?
We are high above the clouds. Much higher than the clouds.
Now let's analyze the operational situation in the Alexandrovsky direction. Putin's army is up to its usual tricks here as well. In the Alexandrovsky direction, the enemy launched 3 assaults in the areas of the settlements of Ivanovka, Dobropole, and Novoye Zaporizhzhia. Gavrilovka and Orly were subjected to enemy airstrikes. Another rich catch for the armed forces of Ukraine. A very important aerial target was shot down. In particular, Ukrainian forces struck a K-27 multi-purpose shipborne helicopter near the settlement of Kamyshli in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea. Yes, and in general, the occupiers' military aviation is going through extremely difficult times. Here are the details.
On the night of March 5th, the Ukrainian Navy, together with special operations units, struck a drilling platform, Sivash, in the waters of the Black Sea, where Russian units.
This platform was used by the enemy as an observation post, a communications relay point, and for deploying electronic warfare and short-range air defense systems. Its purpose was to control strike UAVs that were aimed at attacking infrastructure in the Odessa and Mykolaiv regions and posed a threat to civilian shipping. As a result of the combat operations by maritime unmanned drones and aerial unmanned vehicles, enemy communications control assets were struck and significant losses were inflicted. In manpower,
Ukrainian military forces also successfully destroyed a Russian Ka-27 helicopter as it attempted to land on the offshore drilling platform in the area.
We regularly drive the Russians out of there as part of our planned operations. But this time, events unfolded much more dramatically for them. Because now, even if someone is still left on one of those platforms waiting for evacuation, they will have to wait a long time. And the evacuation will be complicated precisely because the site is now occupied by the destroyed helicopter. The Ukrainian Defense Forces used various means. Drones, unmanned boats, as well as air assets were used. The approach was carefully planned, taking into account what kind of weapons were there. The helicopter was shot down as it was landing, and all the equipment there was damaged. They used that tower for relaying and jamming signals.
2 weeks ago, the Defense Forces destroyed 2 more Russian helicopters, a multi-purpose Mi-8 and an attack Ka-52 using strike drones. The Russian birds were attacked at the Pugachevka airfield in the Oriel region.
it is likely that the Russians are using this site as an operational airfield for a combined helicopter unit tasked with intercepting Ukrainian long-range UAVs. The destroyed multi-purpose Mi-8 helicopter, tail number 53, belonged to the 319th Separate Helicopter Regiment based in Chernigovka, Primorsky Krai, Russia. The Ka-52 Alligator attack helicopter, tail number 18, belonged to the 16th Army Aviation Brigade located in Zernograd, Rostov region.
Ukrainian systematic attacks on airfields and locations where Russian aviation is based have shown that the occupiers have serious problems. There is a shortage of pilots. Ukrainian forces are increasingly managing to strike Russian aircraft right on the ground. In other words, the Kremlin simply does not have enough pilots to relocate planes and helicopters. The effectiveness of Ukrainian drone strikes has also increased significantly.
Preventive actions are more effective than trying to counter these means when they are already in the air. We see this thanks to technical advancements, the adoption of new types of weaponry, the modernization of old ones, and the training of maintenance personnel.
According to open sources, the deaths of about 110 combat aircraft pilots and more than 150 attack and transport helicopter pilots have been confirmed. In other words, total losses among Russian pilots since the start of the full-scale invasion amount to at least 260 pilots. And this does not include accidents and incidents that have occurred with Russian aviation within Russia itself.
And now we're moving on to Gulyai. On the Polish front, the Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim. In the Gulyai-Pol direction, there were 13 attacks in the area of Mirne Lugovsky and towards Zaleznichne and Yelena Konstantinovka. The defense forces are holding back the onslaught and have already repelled 11 attacks. At the same time, the enemy carried out airstrikes on the areas of the settlements of Lesnoye, Kapani, Dolinka, Gorkoye, and Charivnoye. In 4 years of occupation, the Russians have turned the captured part of the Zaporizhzhia region into a depressed area with a declining economy. Even the local collaborators who once sided with the enemy and expected unprecedented prosperity and well-being from the arrival of the Russian world now admit this. We will tell and show you what real life is like under the Russians.
This is the city of Berdyansk in the Zaporizhzhia region in...
Back in the year 2022, many significant events were unfolding across the globe, marking a truly pivotal moment in our modern history that we still reflect upon today.
Finally back at home.
In the already occupied city, people came out to protest and chanted that Berdyansk is... And this is the city of Dnipro-Rudne. Locals came out to meet the Russian tanks. People did not want to see Russia in their region, but Putin gave the order. This is how, for the 5th year now, part of the Zaporizhzhia region...
The vast territory unfortunately continues to remain under a state of strict military occupation by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, which persists in maintaining its firm and systematic control over the entire region despite the continuous international pressure and the significant local resistance that has been observed throughout this period.
Propaganda media in 26 boast about underground command posts of the Russian Federation Army in the Zaporizhzhia region.
Kilometers of tunnels on the riverbank. We went even deeper so that it would be completely safe. How many meters above us? Another 3 meters on top. And what's up there, concrete slabs? There are concrete slabs, plus an additional covering.
Victory mania on the screens, while collaborators are no longer shy and admit that on the Ukrainian territories occupied by Putin, it's lawlessness like in the 1990s.
Right now, it's like the 90s over there. We need to understand that, right?
In those 4 regions?
Yes, it's the 90s now.
Rogov called for Russia, helped the occupiers seize the Zaporizhzhia region. And now, on camera, he talks about how the invaders started systematically looting abandoned homes under the pretext of inventory checks. Activists are documenting cases of household appliances, furniture, and other valuables being seized. In
the scale of 4 regions, that's several 100,000 people who have either been deceived or are on the verge of losing their own assets. That's it, it's ownerless property. This word, to make ownerless, going back to the rhetoric of the 90s, means to squeeze out or to take away. You understand? In other words, just plain robbery.
The liberators arrived and life started to flourish. Well, by flourish, I mean getting hit over the head.
This is the concept of squeezing out, the bandit version, raiding.
Crimson jackets.
Well, visually, everything looks nice. Visually, they can say all the right things.
We just had the crimson jackets, you know, the new Russians.
Deep down, they're still wearing those crimson jackets. If they could, they would put them on. But now they have the right badge, a membership card from the right party, and all sorts of ways to rob people. Hundreds of ways to rob, especially in the Zaporizhzhia region.
Fair asset seizure.
112? There are exactly 112 ways in the Zaporizhzhia region. Those who know 112 ways. A guardian of the honest expropriation of people's property.
Abalitsky. Instead of helping people, he promotes Putin's projects, talking about the second stage of the Zaporizhzhia Heroes project.
A regional project as part of the large-scale initiative of our president, Vladimir Putin.
19 traitors took part, brought in from quasi-republics like the DPR, military turncoats, figures, and activists.
The Zaporizhzhia Heroes program is the foundation upon which our defenders will stand. Participants in the special military operation, veterans of combat actions.
They're even ready to send their own teachers into exile.
We, teachers from Berdyansk, are being told to go work in the Far East.
The population has also been left without medical care.
The governor's people want to shut down the Melitopol Regional Oncology Dispensary.
They are being forcibly assigned to doctors from Russia. Problems with prescriptions and providing care start immediately because there aren't enough doctors.
Rogov describes in detail how Russia is driving out residents of the occupied territories, how it doesn't let them return home, how it seizes, appropriates, and essentially robs and steals their property. And this can no longer be written off as enemy propaganda in any way. No one can say that this was made up by Denis Kazansky or anyone else. No, this is being said by a collaborator, a Zed supporter, yes, a person who directly participated in this Russian aggression against Ukraine, who worked for some time in the occupation administration of the Zaporizhzhia region. In
Berdyansk, the municipal collapse continues. The heating was turned off throughout the entire winter.
There is no electricity, no water, and often no gas. That is, well, it's quite hard to survive.
The occupiers kept shifting the blame onto each other.
Work is underway to provide for the residents of the city of Polohi, who are now in a difficult situation.
Not only are the residents of Berdyansk receiving bills for centralized heating, even though they have their own systems, it turned out that individual heating is prohibited by law in the Russian Federation. And the owners of the Berdyansk heating network from Yaroslavl simply decided to make some money.
Who is responsible for the roads in Zaporizhzhia region? The roads in Zaporizhzhia region are managed by the governor's son-in-law's father. And who is the Minister of Sports of Zaporizhzhia region? The son-in-law. And who is responsible for information and so on in the department? The niece. Well, something's not right here. I mean, is it really possible that in a region with 1.5 million people there isn't...
Is this unique to Zaporizhzhia?
This is the case in all the new territories.
During the occupation of Vasilivka in Zaporizhzhia region, people are forced to enjoy the new benefits of civilization. The basement of their house is flooded with sewage. Russia is also robbing the farmers. A fertile region has become unprofitable.
Can you believe that? Such a fertile land, such an incredibly rich region, and people were forbidden to take anything out beyond the region because you had to get a special permit, a card, red, green, yellow, and so on. It's quite difficult, and without the card you can't take anything out anywhere. In other words, artificial obstacles were being created, so to speak.
Today, the Sea of Azov is an example of how war and occupation can become a catalyst for an environmental crisis. You can't even use the fish for food. The situation with aid is not the best. Evacuees are being brought into occupied Tokmak in the Zaporizhzhia region, and humanitarian aid is distributed at the expense of local residents. In this way, Russian propagandists turn aid into a tool of control and manipulation.
This humanitarian aid, down to the last package, is intended for this specific category of people. All these people, you know, they live with an open wound. They had everything, they possessed it all. And now, by the will of Ukraine, by the will of Ukraine's rulers, they lost all of it.
Compliant judges deprive people of freedom for comments on social media. This man simply spoke out sharply about Russian citizens and he was given 6 years. In addition to unlawful sentences, crime is also on the rise in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region. One of the latest incidents was the deliberate murder of 2 civilians committed by servicemen of the Russian Federation in the city of Primorsk near Berdyansk. No one was punished. And this is only a small part of what is happening under occupation. The locals, more and more, they hate Russia and the Russian world it has brought.
That's all for today, but very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists, brought to you from the hottest spots of the war, so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.